Behind me is the old Iranian embassy. You can see these ornate tiles, a little bit of the wooden door. These buildings were left after the 1979 hostage crisis, when the US Embassy in Tehran became a place where 66 Americans were held, most of them for 444 days. That's why deteriorated relationship began between Washington and Tehran after the overthrow of the Shah. And then the Iranian diplomats who were here left. US and Iranian ties were severed in April of 1980. What's interesting is that being here right now, in front of me are flowers and two pre-revolution Iranian flags. So they have the green, the white, and the red, just like the current Iranian flag of the Islamic Republic, but they also have the sun and the lion. There's also a guy who is taking video, which means he's currently recording me right now. But a little bit of the atmospherics of this moment. Of course, this is an extraordinary day to an extraordinary weekend where the Iranians have confirmed that the supreme leader has been killed. And really, what now happens? Like, will this ever be used again as a space? So let me just walk you through some of the information that I've been gathering today. So the President Trump, described how Ayatollah Khamenei could not evade U.S. intelligence. We know that the New York Times reported that the CIA had been tracking Khamenei's movements for months, and they grew more and more confident with where he was going, what his patterns of life were, and that ultimately they became aware of a meeting that was going to involve multiple senior officials, according to the Israeli side. That also included the supreme leader. And so this is why the timeline got moved up for the attacks that were planned. Now, the U.S. usually conducts these sorts of operations under the cover of darkness at night, catching people unaware. But this was a moment that clearly this administration saw as being very timely. And it made me remember back in 2001 in Afghanistan, when Osama bin Laden was hiding out in the Tora Bora cave complex. The CIA wanted to go after him, didn't have the resources that they needed. And it took another 10 years until 2011, when the Navy SEALs raided bin Laden's compound in Pakistan to accomplish the mission. What I'm told is that when it comes to these kinds of operations, it usually doesn't just rely on one source of intelligence. So even if, say, the US had a great human source close to the Ayatollah, or if the Israelis also had and do clearly have great penetration on that human level, there was also likely technical sources that contributed to the mosaic here. Now, we are starting to hear about the unfortunate deaths, not just of civilians, but U.S. service members. U.S. Central Command saying earlier today that, quote, as of 9:30 a.m. ET, March 1st, 3 U.S. service members have been killed in action. 5 are seriously wounded as part of Operation Epic Fury. Several others sustained minor shrapnel injuries and concussions and are in the process of being returned to duty. So we know that more is likely ahead, and the people that I've spoken to, they've said that we're likely to see more casualties, especially on the U.S. service member side. Also curious to note that CENTCOM has spent the day dispelling what the Iranian regime is putting out. For example, the Iranian regime spread on social media that 50 service members were killed. CENTCOM says that is not true. Now, among the people that I've spoken with today is retired Lieutenant General David Deptula. He was the first chief of ISR, meaning intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance in the Air Force. He told me, quote, I'm sure that the Iranian intel services are in disarray because they would be a key element that both the U.S. as well as the Israeli forces would be targeting. So I think they're probably in survival mode right now. And of course, we know that beyond Khamenei, the leader of the IRGC, head of the National Security Council. Many other top leaders have been, as the Israelis like to call it, decapitated. He also, Deptula, said that the U.S. appears to be taking the same strategic approach as during Operation Desert Storm. This was back in 1991 when the U.S., along with other countries, was responding and operating in Iraq, launched an incredibly successful air campaign. And Deptula would know this because he was the architect of this operation. What he told me was, quote, "What you see is the classic application of force to achieve the objectives against the regime. The regime's 5 key strategic centers of gravity, and those are leadership, key essential systems, critical infrastructure, population, and fielded military forces." Also, CENTCOM has announced just a few hours ago that the IRGC headquarters is destroyed. So this very much is proving the logic that Deptula was sharing with me. Now, another former senior defense official told me, quote, "The thing to watch is, are the Iranians able to mass their missiles?" And they have not been able to do that. They need to fire volleys of 700 missiles. Sorry, not seven, several hundred missiles if they want to penetrate our defenses. And they have been unable to do that. They're firing much smaller numbers because we're disrupting their ability to do that. So we're having great success going after them. We need to continue that, and I think we will. And that's what I would watch for over the next 96 hours. How effective are Iranian missile strikes? Now, we know that after that 12-day war, that Iranian air defenses were really harmed, that there were major holes that the Israelis created in doing that. And so what have the Iranians hit? We know that they targeted a luxury hotel in Dubai. They hit U.S. bases in Qatar, Kuwait, UAE, Bahrain. The question is, how does this affect relations with neighbors? That former defense official who spoke to me on the condition of anonymity said that this is Iran trying to, quote, widen the war. But this person also said, quote, "I think it's going to backfire on them because it's going to bring these nations on our side and be increasingly supportive of what we're trying to do." When these nations started trying not to be particularly supportive of what we were trying to do. So seeing the shift there, Iran is going to push them into our corner. And one of those countries, I believe it is the UAE, has now announced that it is calling back its diplomatic personnel and it's shutting down its embassy in Tehran. So we're already starting to see that the neighboring countries are really, really ticked off, angered by what the Iranians are doing as part of their retaliation. Now, the big question is, what happens next? Here I am standing outside of this embassy. Will anyone ever walk through its doors again and have sort of, warmer relations, functional and warm relations with Washington? This person said, and this is a long one, but I found it to be really quite interesting. Quote, "I think one of two things will happen. Either you get some form of rising where you get a regime change." I'm stopping the quote for a second. Remember that when President Trump announced this, he appealed to the Iranian people themselves. He literally came out and said, now is the time to seize control of your destiny and to unleash a prosperous and glorious future that's close within your reach. This is the moment for action. Don't let it pass. So he's saying to the people, it's your turn now. Go for it. This person tells me, either you get some form of rising or you get a regime change. I don't think that's likely, but it's certainly, then the person sort of shifted direction. Here's the thing, Sasha, we're terrible at predicting this. We missed on Bashar Assad in Syria. We missed on other regimes. We're no good when it comes to predicting totalitarian regimes collapsing. So you could see a collapse and you could see a different regime, or you could see a regime that's more of the same. If it's a regime, and this is the second option he's describing, if it's a regime that's more of the same, then we're going to continue to beat them up until we compel them to accept some of the points we won't accept on nuclear weapons and on ballistic missiles. And if they don't accept them, then I think we're going to continue to strike them very hard until they do. And I believe there are finite limits to what they're going to be willing to accept, and we can approach those if necessary. I would hope that someone in Iran will realize and negotiate with us. It's possible they won't, in which case we're going to bomb them until there's nothing left in terms of a missile program. And then when they begin to rebuild it, we'll come back and bomb them again. That is the end of that quote. Interestingly, Senator Tom Cotton, who is the chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, told CBS Today that, maybe there's some sort of Delcy Rodriguez type person who this administration can work with. And if you remember, many weeks ago, I reported on the fact that this administration has been doing outreach and looking for some sort of disaffected IRGC commanders that they can work with. Is that possible? Is that realistic? I can't say anything more in terms of the success or realism on that. But that is the question, isn't it? So when it comes to retaliation, what could this regime do? What are they capable of when we've seen so many of their leaders be taken out, not just in the last day and a half, but by the Israelis in a post-October 7th world? A former intelligence official reminded me of the assassination of Yahya Sinwar, leader of Hamas, after the October 7th attack. And since then, the Israelis have systematically gone after the leaders of the proxy groups, as well as the leaders inside Iran on Tehranian soil. And yes, the Iranians still have missiles. They still have other weapons. It's not like these are golden days ahead. So the question now becomes, which areas would be most vulnerable to Iranian retaliation? What I'm told is that first off come the big cities nearby that have their own riches and their own relationships with the United States in terms of hosting U.S. defenses, as in missile systems like Patriots, THAADs. And those would include Abu Dhabi, Dubai, Doha, Riyadh, Kuwait City. These are lucrative targets. But we also talked about the United States and the potential for attacks here. You'll recall that President Trump and members of his administration in the past have been targeted by Iranians. The Secret Service had to issue layers of protection because there were threats of Iranian assassination, according to U.S. intelligence. So after a weekend like this, and what is likely to be a sustained attack for days, weeks, what could happen here? A few people that I spoke to described the chance of having there be lone wolf attacks, people who had been radicalized, as well as proxy groups. And that includes gangs, cartels. I was reminded of an incident in 2011 when the Attorney General Eric Holder and then FBI Director Robert Mueller announced charges on two people, saying that the Iranian government had tried to use a Mexican drug cartel to kill a Saudi official here in Washington, D.C., where I am, at a restaurant in Georgetown called Cafe Milano. So there is the possibility of that happening. You can bet that the FBI, as well as other agencies like Homeland Security's intelligence are going to be very, very careful of that. Now, I described the flags, the flowers that are out front. There have also been images and videos and messages on social media which show that the Persian diaspora here have been celebrating this moment, seeing this as a moment that has needed to come in time. I contrast Senator Tom Cotton's remarks with what Senator Mark Warner, the ranking Democrat on the Senate Intelligence Committee, has been telling different media outlets that there was no imminent threat. Why are we doing this now? So there's really a spectrum of opinions here of whether this was a good idea, with the supporters saying this needed to happen. This was a deceptive regime, unpredictable. They've been trying to build a nuclear weapon. They are the supporters of multiple terrorist groups the world over. They've caused so much harm. They need to be stopped here. And then, of course, come the critics who say this is endangering American lives. There was another path we could have taken here. There was no congressional approval issued here. And this could put us in a much more dangerous place depending on who steps up next. We know that there is now this council in place. And one question that nobody has been able to answer in my book has been, why is it that with this 86-year-old man's death, clearly knew that he was a person of interest to the United States? He clearly knew that after the 12-day war in June and as negotiations were really not going anywhere, that there was the potential for the United States to strike and to kill him. What were those succession plans, and why was it that they were not able to keep him and so many other leaders protected? Did they no longer have the resources? Was it hubris of an authoritarian regime, as retired Lieutenant General David Debtula told me? What else could have been at play? Maybe there were some specific succession plans that just really got upended because so many of the people that would have been involved in that now themselves are also dead. So this is just beginning. I'm sure we're going to get a lot more when it comes to the intelligence that the Israelis and the Americans had, some of the different tactics, the implications from it. I will say that I think even seeing some of the messages here, is this turning into a situation where, yes, we were successful in taking out Saddam Hussein back in 2001. Are we back? Are we getting ourselves back into that situation? What could happen next? I think there is a distinction to make, though, here. Remember that back in 2001, that was flimsy intelligence that did not pan out. The reasons for going into Iran, at least according to the Republicans, are very, very established through many years. And let's remember that in Trump's first term, he ordered the strike that killed top Iranian General Qasem Soleimani. This has been something that he has been wanting to do for a very long time. So when it comes to motivation of entering into a country, there's certainly, or I should say, striking a country, not entering. But when it comes to attacking, there is more justification here than there was in Iraq back in 2001. But I do think that the question of what comes next, can there be a person that the United States can work with, or does this just escalate the situation years from now, is an important question to be asking. So thank you for watching. The sun is setting. It's time for me to get going. But I'll keep you posted, and I'll see you later.